Hi everyone, it's Alyssa and this is Always Cinema Chic, the place that encourages you to stay in, get dressed up, and watch a movie. So today I'm going to review the original Blade Runner, and it is just as revolutionary as I remember it to be. It retains all of the meaning, the entertainment value, the kind of atmospheric setting that you get. It was just a really exciting movie to watch, and it just doesn't age, which is always a great thing. And if it's even possible, this movie made me more excited to see Blade Runner 2049 or 2046. Yep, 2046. On Friday. I am just so excited to see this. So Blade Runner stars Harrison Ford, Sean Young, Rutger Hauer, and Daryl Hannah, and it's directed by Ridley Scott. And this is the first movie that ever put cyberpunk on screen. So cyberpunk is when you take really advanced technology and you mix it in a world where a large portion of that population lives in squalor and poverty. And so it has this very dark, moody atmosphere feel to it. And this movie has certainly encouraged and inspired so many movies. So you can't even look at The City in AI or The City in Ghost in the Machine without seeing that the correlation to Blade Runner is absolutely uncanny. And even looking at television, Westworld and the themes and the ideas that they present in that TV show, they really are directly taken from the ideas in Blade Runner. And Blade Runner, of course, also has a lot of the ideas from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So it all kind of, connects together. So the story takes place in 2019 in Los Angeles, and a lot of the population that's rich, they live off-world and they use replicants, which are really human-looking robots, to be their slave labor, and they basically do whatever it is that they feel like doing to these replicants. But the replicants have a real awareness of self. They have this new prototype that's the Nexus 6, and these robots are supposed to be more than human. That's the point of them. And so they are questioning who they are. They want their freedom, and there are little pockets and groups that are rebelling and then coming back to Earth. So the story starts out with a group of Nexus 6 replicants killing 23 humans off-world, and they've now come back to Earth to find their maker. Replicants are only able to live for 4 years, and then after that time they simply shut down. Rutger Hauer plays Roy Batty, who is the leader of the replicants who have come back down to Earth, and then you have Pris, who's played by Daryl Hannah, and she's his love interest but also a pretty agile replicant. And then Harrison Ford, in one of his most famous roles, plays Deckard, who is an ex-Blade Runner police officer who is just the best of the best at finding these replicants and retiring them. And so he's brought out of retirement reluctantly and has to hunt down these 6 replicants one by one. But along the way, he really starts to question what makes someone human, and he learns quite a bit on this journey that he goes on. So first he goes to Dr. Tyrell, who is the owner of the Tyrell Corporation and the creator of the replicants, and there he meets Rachel, who is his secretary. But Rachel's really interesting because she is a replicant who doesn't know that she's a replicant. She thinks she's human because she has memories that have been implanted in her brain or whatever it is, which is very similar to what Westworld is about. And so he meets her and he starts to see them as maybe a little bit different than they've accepted. And soon enough, Rachel starts to realize that she is actually a replicant, and she goes through this crisis of identity and existence, and she doesn't really know who she is anymore. She kind of loses her entire sense of self and being. And thus Blade Runner goes on an existential quest where Deckard starts to see the humanity in the replicants and finds fault in the fact that he has killed many in just the most cavalier way. Then the replicants begin to learn that even though they may have been created, they still exist and think. Therefore, they must be just as real as any human. they find the importance of living in the moment and not really worrying about the fact that they don't really have a past. So Blade Runner takes on the science fiction genre through a sort of film noir style and lens, and that's what makes the cinematography so interesting. So you're dropped into a world that is so dark and brooding, and you get all of these neon lights at night, and then on top of that there's great use of shadow and light that's used throughout the entirety of the film. And you'll see a lot of shots where there's light and dark lines that are running across the character's face, and that really tells us of the prison that these characters are living in, and that a lot of them, the replicants, are really living in the shadows, and they're not really wanted at all by society. In fact, they're wanted dead. And it makes you really end up rooting for these replicants very early on. They're very reminiscent of Frankenstein's creature. You empathize with them immediately. And one of the great scenes is when Rutger Hauer, who's baddie, ends up meeting his maker, and when Tyrell sees him, he really looks at him as nothing more than an object and nothing more than money to him. He's basically meaningless to him. And this goes to the whole nature that the replicants are more human than the actual humans. They're very interested in philosophy, and they have very close ties to each other. They're always looking out for each other and caring for each other. And the humans, you don't often see them in the same shot. They are never trying to help each other out. Everyone is very much on their own. And I can't help but think that this movie really is a product of the 1980s, where American culture said that greed was good and you were really in it for yourself, and anything that you could do for yourself to make more money was deemed a great thing. And I feel like Blade Runner came out at this time to make commentary on what was going on in the culture. And so it's interesting to think about the fact that the movie's coming out, the sequel, 35 years later. So, I wonder if Denis Villeneuve and Ridley Scott are trying to tell us something about the world that we live in today. Some people might find that the pacing of the film is a little bit slow, but it really is necessary and critical to the overall message. It needs to be a slow film. So there's a sort of drudgery in every step that Deckard must take to find the replicants, just shrouded in darkness with only one and maybe like 1.5 moments of sun in the whole film. It honestly looks like the earth is dying. So I have to say that I think this is Ridley Scott's best film. This is certainly him at his most artistic. There is quite a lot of symbolism in the cinematography and the use of eyes throughout the entire film. The way that he shoots characters, the color scheme that he uses, it really is so artistic. And he only uses 90 special effects, 90 for the film, which is really nothing for a movie like this, that looks the way it does. And that only adds to the reality. This also has such an impressive soundtrack. It's very somber and vitriolic, and it just adds to the whole tone of the film. But I would honestly be remiss if I did not mention the great performances in this film. I think this is one of Harrison Ford's best performances, because he's usually very funny and charming, but here he's very serious, and he's not a perfect character. He's very layered. He has a lot of flaws. There's one very uncomfortable scene where he's being quite forceful with Rachel, and it's very uncomfortable, but at the same time Rachel is sort of learning about her own existence, and she has to come to terms with who she is and her ability to love on her own. And what's interesting is that Harrison Ford and Sean Young really didn't like each other when they were making this movie, and it's odd. You can kind of feel that as you're watching it, but I kind of think that adds to the story. And then we can't forget Pris and Baddie. So Daryl Hannah kind of looks like an oversized doll, but she has one of the most important lines, which is taken from Descartes when she says, "I think, Sebastian, therefore I am." And it's that line that really empowers the replicants and lets them know that they can be something more. And then Rutger Hauer really is the ultimate kind of Frankenstein's creation when he goes back to try to find his maker and seek out a greater purpose for himself and try to just live longer and have a life where he's not in fear all of the time. So I hope that people who have not seen this movie definitely see it before the sequel comes out. It is an absolute masterpiece, and I really think you would need to watch it before you watch the sequel. And I would say to that, make sure that you're watching the final cut that came out in 2007. So if you watch the original version of Blade Runner, that is not the movie that Ridley Scott wanted to put out. There's a lot of voiceover from Harrison Ford, and it's very direct, and it tells the audience what they should think. And this movie is something that is meant to be subtle, so I definitely recommend that version. All right, and now for the grades. For film and artistry, I don't think this is a surprise. I would definitely give Blade Runner an A+. It is a masterpiece. It's on a different level for science fiction, and it really has inspired all great science fiction that we have right now. Everything from Dark City and Ex Machina, it's just inspired everything. And then for watchability, which is how much I enjoy it, obviously an A+. I actually just bought the 30th edition that gives you 5 different versions of the movie on Blu-ray, so that was on back order, so I can't wait for that to come out. And I did want to say one more thing, but this is definitely a spoiler, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want any kind of a spoiler, I'd say stop it right now, walk away, thank you for watching, all that stuff. But if you have seen it, I can say I am so excited to find out whether Deckard is or is not a replicant. I mean, I hope that question is answered in the upcoming movie. I completely believe that he is a replicant, because if we take that whole sequence where he is talking to Rachel and he tells her what her memory is, and the fact that he knows the memory because he's gone through her file, and then later on when we see Edward James Olmos's character make a papier-mâché unicorn for Deckard, well, he has a dream earlier on in the film that of a unicorn, and so when you see that unicorn, you realize, oh my God, how else would Edward James Olmos, how would he know this unless Deckard was a replicant or is a replicant, and he's been in his files, and this would explain why he's so kind of mean and nasty to Deckard throughout the entire film. So I also love that scene, because once he sees the origami unicorn, he doesn't care. I think he realizes that he's a replicant, but he runs away with Rachel, and he just makes the decision that he's going to live life the way that he wants to live it, and he's going to live in the moment. So I'm just so excited to finally have that question answered, and they better answer it. I'm almost certain that they will. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below if you've seen Blade Runner. Are you excited for the sequel that's coming out? I'm absolutely going to be putting out a review for the sequel this upcoming weekend, so look out for that. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and remember, it is always in fashion to stay in, get dressed up, and make it a cinema chic night. Thank you guys so much. Bye!